Welcome to today's Grown In Conversation, sponsored by the Cannabis Business Association of Illinois, where we learn from experienced dispensary owners and operators across the country what they did to get their businesses up and running. Commercial cannabis in Illinois is still in an embryonic stage. Nearly 7 months into the legalization of recreational consumption, cultivators from across the state are still not producing enough product to meet strong demand. Approximately 60 dispensaries are already in business, with new ones opening every week. Further, in September, we should see licenses for 75 additional dispensaries awarded. This seems like a lot of retail activity until you zoom out and observe the landscape in other states that impose fewer restrictions to entrepreneurs and investors looking to sell legal weed. Michigan, which legalized adult use cannabis sales only a month before Illinois, has more than 250 dispensaries. Washington State, which legalized recreational sales in 2014, has more than 450. With a focus on delivering business intelligence and operational advice to the thousands of entrepreneurs in Illinois hoping to own a license for retail cannabis sales in the coming months, today Grown In is convening dispensary owners and operators from across the country to share what to do and what not to do upon receiving a cannabis retail license and breaking ground on a new business. We will introduce our panelists in a moment, but first let's tee up a few issues that are top of mind for everyone. Let's start with day one. In Illinois, the wait to see who will win a license is excruciating. Applicant groups fortunate enough to win the right to sell legal weed now must transition from theory to reality. This includes finalizing real estate, construction, and early-stage human resources decisions while also establishing proactive relationships with communities where many residents are opposed to having a pot shop in their backyard. While all new businesses invariably need to own a bank account, this most basic requirement is tricky when most banks won't touch any company that transacts federally illegal products. Beyond finding a friendly bank, how will you accept payments, transfer cash, and choose the right software to keep your business not only growing, but compliant? And finally, we get to product marketing. Will the next wave of what in theory will be independently owned dispensaries have access to enough products grown in Illinois to meet consumer demand? How can operators identify suppliers, brands, processed consumption types that not only are in stock but also resonate well with customers? How do you adjust your marketing plan when you are not the only store in town or even on your own block? We will ask, and our panelists will answer questions about best practices associated with opening and operating dispensaries, as well as what continues to keep them up at night. Joining us are Portia Mittons, a dispensary owner in Oregon who is also an applicant for a retail license in Illinois. Providing input from a multi-state retailer and cultivators perspective is Gabe Mendoza, who serves as Vice President of Illinois Operations for Phoenix-based Forefront and has opened up multiple dispensaries in multiple states. Finally, DiGiacomo owns dispensaries in 3 states. He is also the co-founder of Trinity Compassion Care Centers, which has 2 locations in Peoria.
Great, and welcome. We are so pleased to have all of you today. And as many of the grown-in viewers and readers are from Illinois, they're in the state that we're in this prolonged waiting period on dispensaries. As we just heard, a precious few of them are going to have a license and then say, uh-oh, what next? Portia, starting with you, what's the first thing that you did upon learning that you had your first license?
The first thing I did, well, I was in Illinois when I learned of it.
And when was this?
This was in November of 2016. And I was actually in a press conference with the then mayor at the time. And I left out the room and did like a little happy dance and screamed and shouted and jumped up and down. And then I straightened out my shirt and I went back in.
I must ask, what municipality were this mayor of the press conference that you observed? Chicago in 2016. That's one I've never heard before. Let's keep it on day one. Gabe, how about you?
So day one, we definitely screamed. I remember we had some neighbors under us in the offices that we had, and we were yelling so loud that they had to bang up with like a broom or something and be like, "What are you guys yelling at 2 p.m. in the afternoon?" And then I started to, at the time, we were in between ZBA, which is Zoning Board of Appeals in Chicago. And so it was really a real estate hustle, which I could delve into, but the long story short, it took a year to get through the ZBA. We had to switch locations 3 different times. The first one was Pullman, and it became a federal.
We're gonna unpack all of these, but first, Ron, you owe us your day one story.
Day one story. I was in Florida at the time, looking into that market, which was kind of really in its confusion states. Like 6-7 years ago, I guess we got awarded a license, and we really wanted to be in the Florida market. But at the same time, we had a team that applied for the Illinois lottery system, kind of, if you will. And when I was looking into the Florida market, I got the phone call like in the afternoon. Somebody got an email saying that we were awarded a license, and that night just had a couple of great bottles of wine and a good dinner, and then looked to tackle the rest that was coming down the pipeline, which I'm sure you're going to get into. But
well, let's start getting into it. So it sounds like there was maybe a celebratory event,
yes,
and then the morning after, and Gabe, all 3 of you starting. You know, Gabe outlined. You talked about zoning. Okay, that first set of things, your first set of priorities, I would love, starting with Gabe, all of you to expand on.
Sure. It's different in every state, dependent upon how the applications are structured. Do you need to have real estate ahead of time or not? In our case, for the medical licenses in Illinois, we had a couple locations that we were in the middle of ZBA on, and so we had to go ahead and apply for those. I think that if people are from Illinois and are applying under this realm, they should probably keep in mind the fact that you didn't necessarily need to have real estate. So your trek, you should be, if you're looking right now to do something, identifying the areas in which the municipality in which you applied in zones. You know, are you going to be able to zone correctly? Do you have to change the zoning? That takes time, that takes money. That's a really big one, I think, and that's one you can do right now for relatively cheap if you put the legwork in. And so that was the first thing. Obviously, working with your local regulators to understand the timeline you have to build out, working with your GCs to understand what your site plan is going to be based on your square footage, based on what it is you want your dispensary to be able to do. And so there's a lot to do at the beginning, but really you have to understand that you're going to need a place to sell your product. And so starting there is a great idea. Obviously hiring all of your ancillary services, your lawyers, your HR and stuff kind of follows suit, but that's where I would start.
Ron, is it location?
Yeah, I mean, we had a location picked out. We had already done the grassroots work with the city council, letting them know that we had applied. We met with a lot of which is a great idea, meet with the police commissioner, the fire commissioner, just get the community involved and saying that, hey, you may win one. And, you know, we did a lot of legwork even before we even knew we won one, just to kind of be welcome in the community. Because you remember in Illinois, this was a total new thing. Nobody knew what to expect with the program. It turned out great as is, but still there's always a community like, oh my God, is my city going to go downhill because now we're selling marijuana out of a storefront. We had an issue where the city pulled last minute. They pulled our zoning when we had a zoning, and we we didn't have to get a special use. We were kind of like grandfathered there. But they kind of pulled a week before we were going to open, they kind of pulled our zoning back. Some councilmen felt that they weren't fully educated on the process. So then we had to get an attorney team and kind of go back in there and say, hey, you can't do this to us on final hour before we're going to open up and we need our CO and things. So yeah, it was a little crazy. It's always a fight with these things because a lot of times the local municipalities do not get educated on what the state puts out, right? And then you're in that onerous position of educating your local city officials, and if they're not educated. And we did a successful job at that, and luckily, but that I would caution everybody, that's going to get a dispensary license to do that legwork, make sure that you're working with the local city that you're going to apply for, and get that under your belt.
Well, Portia's local city was Chicago, and the last time we checked with her, she was doing a happy dance walking out of, I guess it was Mayor Emanuel's press conference.
Yes.
Then what?
Then our dispensary was in Oregon, so then it was like, oh shoot, I gotta move to Oregon. But oddly enough, we had zoning issues there as well. Zoning was my first thought. It was like, because the city was sort of anti-cannabis, but we had followed all of the rules and regulations, and they tried to put in ordinances after the fact to keep us out. So then we had to go get a attorney that specialized in zoning and land use and fight the city, and we won, obviously. And so we had to decide, do we halt building out while we're working on the zoning thing? Because if we lose, we just wasted this money. Or do we continue going? And so, I was like, you know what? I'm not losing. So we just kept going while we were fighting with the city at the same time. And thankfully, we had some people who were on our side, and the law was on our side. But zoning is a huge thing. And, just mirroring what the other two gentlemen said, building a relationship with people there.
So lesson there. And then, so that's a common denominator. I'd like to get an idea on, starting with Ron, the number of months it took you to open up after the initial license, at least
about 9 months.
9 months.
Yeah, we opened up like December 7th, and we got awarded in April sometime of 15.
And then beyond zoning, we don't want to call them secondary because everything's important, but what else fueled your priorities at that point?
Of course, trying to hire a staff and educate them on cannabis, coming from the Colorado markets and things, it was easy to find bud tenders and in other states that had knowledge. But, when we working with a new job market like this, we knew we had to ramp up our education on getting our bud tenders educated. We don't actually call them, we never call them bud tenders because we wanted to stay medically focused. The first patient that walked through our door was a veteran in a wheelchair who had MS, wanted to find out how cannabis can help his condition. Right away, that kind of just threw up like flags, like, okay, I'm going to go out and hire an RN that's got a lot of cannabis knowledge and really ramp up the education side so we can take care of that. So to answer your question, I don't want to digress too much, but staffing became important to us, hiring the right people, the right management. We actually hired a manager that had a high security background in casino business because, these things were going to be targets. We knew that. We knew we were going to get a manager in Illinois unless we imported him from another state, but we thought the security, and it worked out really well because, we've never had an incident. And we all have to kind of protect the program of the state, even all the new operators, right? Making sure that we don't sour the program that's running pretty efficiently right now.
So Ron, you're 9 months after zoning, it's staffing and education, training and understanding the market. You've done multiple. Gabe, you've done multiple. What was after zoning?
So I've done the fastest I've gotten one done is 3 months, and that was in Arkansas. We were the third fastest in Arkansas. That was great. It's actually turned out to be a really productive market. And then the longest was, the first one was in Illinois. Back in this medical round, it was our first one, and we had to switch around zoning so many times that it took us over a year. And we were one of the last ones. We finally ended up in the 10th ward, which is an amazing ward here in Chicago. Alderman Sue Garza has been nothing but helpful and gracious to us. But after zoning in Illinois, because I want to stay Illinois specific, because there's definitely similarities to hopefully what a lot of people will go through once they win a license here. We're running parallel. So with each zoning ordinance, you need to know what your site location is, obviously, right? And so then you're able to build a site plan based on that location. So when you're doing zoning, if you have a strong feeling that you're going to pass, you would probably want to start architectural drawings. And then after you're done with the drawings, you want to get the GCs out there. You want to start having them bid against each other in order to get the best price for that, spec out your drawings, and then go to work. It should take, you know, if you've got a good set of drawings and a good architect, about 6 months. Tough, tight months, but if you can draw them in 6 months to go ahead and do that. And then it's the hiring and training portion where you want to start to look for your new hires probably about a month and a half to 2 months beforehand so that you can get them into a training program that meets what you want to do. And then obviously ordering hardware, software, getting your point of sale installed, getting all those softwares that you're going to be using up to date, and then getting final inspection. Certificate of occupancy, of course, is important, and then regulatory final inspection. I spec'd out about 260 days for you guys who are about to apply. That's what I've spec'd out. It's going to take to open up a dispensary here, specifically in Chicago, because of the onerous zoning. So keep that in mind.
Portia, in terms of the timetable, we're hearing variability of as few as 3 and as much as more than a year. A lot going on there. What was your first experience?
It was 3 months. I think we got awarded in November. We opened January 31st, which is, you know, February 1st, essentially. But like I said, we were doing our build out while we were still going through zoning. We didn't wait. I would advise other people to wait. I was a little crazy. You know, that's just part of my personality. But I was like, you know, I'm just going to build it. I was like, build Rome, they will come. So we were able to save some time because we kept building even though zoning was not in place. So for me, the next bigger thing was security. Security was a really big thing. Wanted to make sure that we had, you know, ample security, the right security. You know, at the time, I believe, because of where I was, there was not a lot of internet service. So it took me a really long time to get the right cloud service for our security system so that we would be in sync with what the state required.
So we're getting into the area of things that you didn't anticipate that came up. You know, everyone has a plan until you get hit in the face, as a boxer used to say. So Ron, what was the first big surprise, or, you know, for our audience, you know, a lesson learned that you don't want to make again and you want other people to know about?
I would have to say that you really have to make sure you're fully capitalized for when the rainy days like that hit. You know, like if the zoning gets prolonged and you start, you know, like Portia said, if you're going to take a risk and start building out even before you have zoning, make sure that if you have an investment group, they all understand that risk, number one. And number two, you know, just try to limit that as much as you can. Because we all kind of like want to get open as fast as possible, especially in a new market, right? And I think you just have to watch that capitalization, make sure that you can cover those burn rates when you're not generating revenue because you're carrying rents, and real estate becomes, you know, a real important factor. If you own the building or rent the building, just look at your timelines on your construction and when you're anticipating opening and making sure you're fully capitalized. You know, most companies start undercapitalized, thinking that they can, you know, everything is going to work like clockwork. I've been in business a long, long time. It never works that way. So.
Gabe, how important is the proverbial rainy day fund?
I think that's a really important differentiation between the medical application and how it really required you to be pre-capitalized beforehand. And this adult use application, where individuals could arguably have gotten through by paying a marginal amount of money or maybe some equity to use somebody to help them apply for the license. And so I really want to kind of pause in this situation. And if anyone hasn't gotten their capital, that is obviously number one, right? So if you have not been capitalized, you need to go ahead and do so. And then you obviously have to value your company correctly. And that depends on the location in which you're going to serve, how the financials that you're able to present and sell to an individual. That's going to be really, really important. And it's going to be a mixture of course, not giving up too much equity versus not being underfunded. That's the first thing that any one of us needs to do in order to be successful, because you're going to need it. So the proverbial rainy day fund is all important, and it's important to not sell yourself short on the how much money you think you're going to need.
So these are massive strategic business building questions, capital versus how much you're giving up to whom, and how that can bring you while you're standing up a business. It's federally against the law. Portia, you're also moving during that time. And like, and it was a within 3 month startup. So where did the funding strategy come into play as you were standing up a business so quickly?
Me. It came into play like immediately. I had to make a lot of adjustments in my personal life, and I had to make a lot of decisions about my retirement in those moments and say, okay, Portia, I literally made this phone call to my mother. I said, Mom, if this fails, can I come sleep on the couch? I said, I can rebuild money, but I can't be homeless. That's what I can't do. I said, I'm not made for the homeless life. But so I looked into the resources that I had and was like, okay, this is approximately how much I think I'm going to need. This is what I have. This is what I can afford to lose. And, just went forward with it. I was very fortunate in that I believe Oregon had the barriers were a lot less. So the bills were a lot less. The requirements were so much less in terms of, the type of security they required. Like, in Illinois for the recreational, they will require you to have a person on site, a security guard on site. And so that's something I did not have to incur in Oregon. So that's, much less money I had to worry about.
So for viewers out there, when you talk about 3 months and when you talk about, I figured it out, the expenses were less, the regulations were less. So with more involved in Illinois and opening up, it's not necessarily going to be as cheap.
Illinois is a totally different monster. And as Gabe said, in terms of, we've been raising funds. We evaluated the company, and we've been, raising funds more than what we think we'll need to start off, but it's better to have more than enough than not enough.
Except we've all had challenges figuring out where we're going to put our funds. Gabe, how do you choose a bank?
Well, it's not you choosing the bank. It's really the bank. It really, really is. It's tough. It is one of the toughest things in this industry, and it's been that way for a really long time. Fortunately, there are banks that start to open up. You've got to look for mostly state chartered banks, right? These big banks that are nationwide don't want to touch the money because of its federal illegality. So you really got to find someone local and hope that they have enough people on staff in order to file those suspicious activity reports, those SARs that every bank has to do when they take our money in or when we give it out to somebody. And I have had such a wide gambit of experiences with the banks that we've used, and some of them have just had to close their shop because they just couldn't hold on to it. Bank of Springfield used to bank all of the players in the industry, and they couldn't hold the weight. I've been asked, I'll never forget this. I was asked by a bank that we were banking with, that shall not be named, to provide the ownership structure of Chase Manhattan Bank. And I didn't exactly, so at the time we had to provide ownership structure for entities that any entity that we sent money to or received it, we had to get their ownership structure. Obviously, I convinced them the error of their ways and that, what are you talking about? But it got that wild that they thought that those were the things that they needed to ask for. And so it's tough. It is really tough. You have to hopefully find banks that are already banking other dispensaries, because you don't want to be the guinea pig and they don't want to be the guinea pig, and then go from there.
Ron, same baddie experience with the banks?
Yeah, Bank of Springfield was one of our first banks, and yeah, we lost that account and went on the hunt to find another one, but it was not easy. You know, once again, like any banks that said, yeah, we'll take your money, had no idea about what was involved with that. Because the Vincent Act did allow banks to actually do business with us, but many banks did not want to put the dedicated resources at it. But the local state charters, like Gabe said, are your best bet to go to and see if they're interested in looking at the program. I think more banks will come online. I understand that there's, you know, a little bit more, less restrictions coming down the pipeline for the banking industry with our industry as well. So we can all keep our fingers crossed on that.
And Portia,
Can I add something to that?
yeah, please.
ATMs are something that owners need to think about. How they're going to utilize the ATM and how they will get the money from the ATM. So they need to start looking into those options when you're talking to banks as well, letting them know, you know, if you plan on having an ATM, how can that work? And then also something I ran into, I don't know if they ran into it, but my personal accounts were also flagged. The ones that are attached to my name and my personal social. And I had one closed.
And this is as you are now in Oregon or in Illinois?
I was in Oregon, but it was a national bank.
Yeah.
It was a national bank. And so I personally got my account flagged and closed down. Thankfully, I had, you know, a backup, but.
It's always good to have a backup or a rainy day fund.
Yep.
So it speaks to that. I mean, Portia, the experience you have coming from, sounds like the political world in Chicago, so you know how the town and the state work, to opening and operating in Oregon, and then coming back to Chicago. What else, you know, so ATM is a key thing here. You know, what else are you thinking about now as an entrepreneur here that knows how the city works with all the lessons you have from the industry?
Relationships. Keeping relationships with your area, with where you're going to be once you get zoned, once you get in your area, and just knowing Chicago. If you're going to be, there are certain areas that we know you're going to need more security than others. You know, there are certain relationships you may need to form within that community with certain people and with certain organizations so that you have a friendly relationship and you can have open conversation. You know, knowing that if you have people that will watch your back, quote unquote, you know, watch your dispensary when you're not there and let you know, these cars keep driving by. That's what I'm thinking.
Community, human relations,
community relations. I mean, political is fine, but realistically, at the end of the day, the politicians are not the ones sitting outside of your door living down the street.
Yep.
You know, the politicians don't know what conversations are being had 6 blocks from where your dispensary is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Very, very much so. So we're talking about precarious nature of banking relationships and what they do to you as individuals. Now, in terms of like transactions, Gabe, what are you doing? You know, or what are your recommendations for, you know, a point of sale system, you know, when you're just getting started?
Sure. I've gone through a lot. I've gone through quite a bit of point of sale systems. My first set of advice is look at what point of sale system the state is mandating that you use for traceability. So essentially every state requires some sort of third-party system that will take this information and report it from the dispensary to the state. And you then have the decision to either lay your own point of sale on that or use that point of sale system in order to effectuate transactions. And if you're in a brand new state, I completely 100% every time suggest that you use the point of sale system that is mandated by the state, because that point of sale system usually is slow to give API keys, which is just it's how you take data and share it between companies. They're usually really slow to give it to other point of sale companies because of course they want to get the first round of customers. So you're very liable to not be accurately reporting your inventory to the state, which is, you don't want that. That's a really big way to get shut down. But in states that have already been established, like Illinois, the current point of sale is BioTrack. I've used that, it works, right? It sends the information up to itself, and so that works. Right now we use a system called LeafLogix, and it's so funny, I hope Dan's watching here. Dan Grabowski, you're welcome. He's the owner of LeafLogix, but that's the one we use. We really like the reporting feature because you're able to take variables and create your own reports, which BioTrack doesn't really allow you to do. Numbers are really important, margins are really important, costs are important. You want as much data as you can, and you want to be able to merge that as well as you can. And so I found that LeafLogix is for me at least, works really well, and we use that in all of our stores in Maryland, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Michigan, and here.
On similar advice in terms of state mandate, and what are you using?
So we were first starting out with BioTrack. Like Gabe said, it's probably smart to go with where you don't have to have that integration. But then we realized that BioTrack was kind of limited in what we wanted to do as far as e-commerce and online ordering. Some other functionalities that some of these other companies came to us with. We were on LeafLogix. We're actually making a move to Cova right now, which gives us a little bit more functionality in areas. So we're now using Cova in the 3 states that we're operating in, actually 2 states, and probably switching out Colorado to Cova as well. So, you know, the biggest thing is that whatever company you use, do your homework with how their development team, their project management team is integrating with the state traceability systems, because that's where you could get into hot water, right? If they're not talking to each other, you have a state inspector come in, start to do an inventory spot, and then all of a sudden your inventory is not matching the BioTrack system, which is the state traceability system. Bam, if you don't have a good explanation or you can't show what happened, you know, you can get warning citations, and it could start costing you money. So my recommendation is look at what you need for your business day to day. If you're going to offer the online ordering pickup, come in, will calls kind of stuff. Look at all that stuff, because we wanted more kind of robust on inventory reporting, actually accounting reporting. Some of the report features just weren't there for us in BioTrack. So yeah, we had to make those decisions. But, you know, you got to remember that when the industry first started, there was very few options, you know, 7 years ago. Now there's probably a handful of POS, you know, people that are integrating with Metric and BioTrack in various states. So, yeah.
So I've heard twice though, it pays to work within what the state is approving to some degree, like it or not. Portia, same story with you?
Same exact story. You know, since we will be new in Illinois, we are currently doing our homework and, you know, checking and seeing what's out there, what's available, what the integrations are, what the reporting is, because just as Gabe and Brad both said, it's important to know, it's important to have the reporting so that you can do your budgeting, so that you can know, you know, how much you're spending and what's selling and what isn't selling, and how you can manage your inventory and things of that nature. And you also always want to be state compliant. I mean, you just have to be.
Yep.
And you also want to think about what do you plan for the future of your dispensary to look like. Like what Brad said, they were looking at online ordering and things of that nature. So
Right.
If that's something you plan on doing, you want to see if your POS system can accommodate that in the future.
Yeah, the other thing is too, and the banks really appreciate this. A lot of the softwares have their third party, like if you wanted to do a cashless ATM at a register, right? A lot of times they'll help you, you know, navigate that integration. And if you can get more money in your account, providing you have a bank that, you know, will accept the money, then you have less cash going out of your facility, which the banks appreciate. Because you got to remember, you know, these dispensaries potentially can generate a lot of cash, and when you bring it to the bank in an armored car, they have to have a team of people counting that money under camera. All those things you need to, help the bank. If they want to do business with you, you almost have to help them because they do choose you, like Gabe said. But you still, once you have them, if you're not organized or you're not trying to work with them as far as handling cash, then that's another reason why we made switches just to integrate cashless ATMs at each register that talk to the system. So when you do your cash closes, right, it's not, you're trying to figure that all out. It's all integrated with one system.
Smart and smooth. So we talked day one, we talked zoning, location, banking, education. Let's go transport. We're want to also remember that our audience are first time dispensary owners. So starting with Portia, which when you started in Oregon, what did you use and what are you contemplating here from a transport perspective?
So in Oregon, we hired a company, an existing transportation company that delivered for us. Oregon do not require that you use a transportation company. So it's a little different in that the growers, the edible people, they can come directly to you with product and drop it off. So that was something that we really didn't have to concern ourselves with too much, thankfully. In Illinois, we know that is a different story. And so we will have to get an armored car. We will have to look into, we actually applied for a transportation license as well, so that we can do our own transportation. So.
That's Gabe. Similar story in terms of experiences out of Illinois and what is required here from a transport perspective.
Sure. When I think of transport, I think of it in two different ways. I think of cash transport, which we use a third party, but man, they can, I've paid at times as much as $1,500 for one cash pickup and transport because our bank's in Timbuktu and we have to drive it all the way over there. So those X amount of hours from where we are to the bank adds up. And so that's one way I think about transportation, cash transportation. But there's no way around that. You don't want to be driving a bunch of cash anywhere. The next is obviously product transportation. And I know that we basically, all of the cultivators have their own transport. There now is a new round of licenses that were, potentially people have applied for, and they're unlimited licenses, which is good, but all of the existing cultivators also applied for, or not, they didn't actually apply, they kind of got grandfathered in. They had to do an application process, but it was much less onerous. So they have their own transports. It's really those transportation licenses are only for the cultivation centers or for people like Portia, if they are to win a craft grow and then have a transportation license as well, they then don't have to pay for somebody else.
But you never want to move cash in a Chevy necessarily.
Definitely not.
No.
Definitely
Right.
not.
Ron, similar.
Yeah, pretty much. What I'm being told, being dispensary owners, now we have 2 locations. It would be nice to be able to move inventory from one location to the other without having to worry about it, So talking to the officials at the IDFPR, I think that's coming down the pipeline, that dispensary owners will be able to apply. So anybody on the call that might be opening up several, that's always a nice option. I think it's going to be a $10,000 license fee or something. To be able to transport your own cannabis, and move stock around. Because right now you can't. The way we have 2 locations, a new one opening up tomorrow, that we would love to be able to take some of our existing stock that's, and bring it over, but it's not possible right now.
Well, the final topic I want to get on, and we have about 5 minutes left, so maybe no more than a minute at a time, has to do with anticipated management of inventory. Specific here in Illinois, the state, there are many dispensaries that can open a license that don't because they don't have enough reliable supply at this point. Obviously, the state just got started 7 months ago, but Portia, starting with you in terms of, okay, you're focused on getting the license, getting up and running business infrastructure. What strategically can you do to secure inventory for day one of operational sales?
You know, that's a good question. That's a really good question. Since we do not have one here currently, I was hoping and expecting that the state of Illinois will give us a list of the current growers and cultivators here so that we can contact them, let them know who we are, you know, this is what we're looking for, and start building relationships with those growers.
Back to the relationships. It always, to your point earlier, it starts with relationships. Gabe, how do you know the climate here? How are you preparing for needing to have more inventory to sell?
I think the reality of the matter is, whether you think that supply is the current cultivator is going to be able to manage that enough supply or not, the reality is they're the ones we have currently. Craft growers are a while out, so you really need to focus in on establishing relationships with the current cultivators in order to get product down the line. And I think that's as simple as just trying to find somebody who you can maintain contact with, like Portia said, a relationship, and hope that once you build out your dispensary 6-7 months down the line, you continue to maintain that relationship where you're able to then be supplied by those cultivators. And of course, they're going to be expanding their supply or their canopy space. So hopefully there is enough, but time will tell.
Ron?
Yeah, I think that's important. Like, I think that that might be public information to find the current cultivators in the state, but I'm not entirely sure. But if it is public information, definitely, of course, said reach out to them. Even if you want to invite them to your facility and show them what your plans are, excite them that you're going to run a top-notch facility. And I think because of supply restrictions right now, it is difficult for them, but I know they're allocating a certain amount to their own dispensary. A lot of cultivators also own their own dispensaries. So, you know, how much do they have available for independents that are coming down the pipeline is always going to be a question. But I think that the state is overseeing that and trying to make sure that there is supply, you know, and putting some mandates and restrictions on them. But until the craft growers get online, it's definitely all about building that relationship.
How much of a dent do you think the craft growers will actually make in terms of expanded inventory?
I think a substantial. I mean, their canopy space is limited, but I think they'll have a substantial impact. I think because some of the growers, here's the opportunity in the craft grow. I think the large growers are expanding; they're becoming huge companies, right? The craft growers can actually, you know, like we have in Colorado, we have a kind of a brewery model. We have a boutique shop in the back and selling it in the front of the house. It's vertically integrated. But people love that. People love that, okay, we know that we're running a small grow in a very controlled environment, not mass produced, not outdoor fields or anything like that. So I think you can make the accurate statement that the connoisseurs of cannabis know the difference. If it's grown in more of a boutique and a craft grow area, you can brand yourself like that. And I think that's important for the craft growers to realize.
So it pays to, even though that you're the buyers, it pays to be nice to all the cultivators. And there'll be a Sam Adams brand in Chicago before too long. I want to thank everybody for joining us on this webinar. Portia, Mittons, Gabe Mendoza, Ron DiGiacomo. I also want to thank our sponsor, the Cannabis Business Association of Illinois. A recorded video of this webinar will appear online shortly and in tomorrow morning's Grown In. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.